The blue planet of Valoria Prime burned in the darkness of space like a dying star. Smoke and fire covered what had once been beautiful oceans and green lands. High Admiral Zexathari stood in the ruins of his command center, watching his world die. His forearms shook as he saw the last of their defense shields fail under the endless attack from above. The enemy had been attacking for 3 long cycles now. The Vorthak Collective came from the dark spaces between stars, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships were not made of metal and circuits like normal vessels. Instead, they were alive, growing and changing with each battle. They ate the wreckage of defeated ships and became stronger. They learned from every fight and adapted to every weapon used against them. Zexathari had sent messages to every corner of the galaxy, begging for help. The Galactic Council had promised to send aid, but those promises were empty words. The other species were too afraid to face the Vorthak. They had seen entire star systems consumed by the living ships, watched as whole civilizations vanished without trace. Now the Cathani faced the same fate, and they faced it alone. The command center shook as another orbital bombardment struck the surface. Through the cracked windows, Zexathari could see the twisted forms of Vorthak bioships moving across the sky like deadly clouds. Each one was the size of a city, covered in organic weapons that pulsed with sickly light. They moved with purpose, systematically destroying everything that might pose a threat to their expansion. Far away, in a different part of the galaxy, Captain Lisa Murphy sat in the command chair of her vessel. The UES Determination was on routine, patrol near what humans called the Outer Rim, checking shipping lanes and watching for pirates. It was boring work, but necessary to keep Earth's growing trade routes safe from raiders and smugglers. Lieutenant Jake Harrison turned from his communication station with excitement in his voice. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's coming from way out in the quarantine zone." He paused, checking his readings again. "Ma'am, this signal is broadcasting in 17 different languages. Someone out there is really desperate for help." Murphy leaned forward in her chair, studying the data on her screen. The message was clear enough, even through the static of long-distance transmission. An alien species called the Cathani were under attack by something called the Vorthak Collective. Their world was dying, their people were being slaughtered, and they were begging anyone who could hear them to come to their aid. What caught Murphy's attention was not just the plea for help, but where it was coming from. The coordinates pointed to a system deep in space that the Galactic Council had marked as forbidden territory. They called it the Quarantine Zone, a place where no civilized species was supposed to go. The Council claimed it was too dangerous, filled with deathworlds and primitive species that posed a threat to galactic peace. "Captain," Harrison said, his voice filled with barely controlled excitement, "that's Deathworld territory. The Council specifically told all member species to stay away from those sectors. They said nothing good could come from contact with whatever lives out there." Murphy smiled grimly as she processed this information. The Galactic Council had made it very clear that Earth and its people were not welcome in their civilized society. They had classified humans as dangerous primitives from a world too hostile to support intelligent life. According to their records, Earth was a Class 3 death world, a planet so dangerous that complex life should not have been able to evolve there at all. "Good thing we're not members of their little club yet," Murphy said, her voice carrying a note of steel that her crew knew meant business. She turned to her tactical officer. "Get me a connection to Admiral Rodriguez back at Earth Command. Tell him we've got a situation that requires immediate attention." The message traveled through space at faster than light speed, reaching Earth Command within hours. Admiral Carlos Rodriguez read the report with growing anger and determination. The aliens might not want humanity in their galactic community, but they were perfectly willing to let innocent people die rather than risk facing this Vorthak Collective themselves. Rodriguez called an emergency meeting with the Earth Defense Council. Within 6 hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled was being prepared for departure. 18 warships, each one representing the very best of human military technology, would make the journey to Cathani space. They carried the finest warriors Earth had to produce, men and women who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. The fleet was led by Rodriguez himself aboard the flagship UES Liberty, with Captain Murphy's determination serving as escort along with Captain Ben Parker's Retribution and 15 other vessels. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who understood they were heading into unknown danger to help people they had never met. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Rodriguez addressed his crews over the communication system. People, we're about to do something that has never been done before. We're going to show this galaxy what humans do when innocent lives are threatened. The Council may not want us in their civilization, but by God, we're going to show them what real civilization looks like. The jump to hyperspace was smooth, the fleet moving as one unit through the twisted dimensions of faster-than-light travel. They would arrive in Cathani space in 18 hours, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them. None of them knew they were about to change the course of galactic history forever. Back on Valoria Prime, High Admiral Zexathari received word that someone had answered their distress call. A fleet of unknown vessels was approaching their system, promising aid against the Vorthak Collective. He wanted to feel hope, but 3 cycles of constant warfare had taught him to be cautious. Too many times they had received promises of help that never came. Too many times they had watched potential allies flee at the first sight of the Collective's bioships. Still, as he watched another city burn under orbital bombardment, Zexathari allowed himself to hope that perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps someone in this galaxy still had the courage to fight monsters instead of running from them. He would soon learn that his hopes were about to be exceeded in ways he could never have imagined. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathani system, to a scene that would have sent most civilized species running for their lives. The space around Valoria Prime was filled with Vorthak bioships, each one a nightmare of living tissue and organic weapons. They moved like predators, circling the dying planet with the patience of creatures that knew their prey had nowhere to run. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, studying the tactical display with cold fury. 300 enemy vessels swarmed around the planet like antibodies attacking an infection. Each bioship was massive, easily the size of a human city, and covered with weapons that pulsed with deadly energy. They had been systematically destroying everything on the planet's surface for 3 cycles, and they showed no signs of stopping. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks whispered from her station at the tactical console, her voice filled with horror at what she was seeing. Jesus Christ, look what they've done to that planet. The once beautiful blue world was now scarred with black smoke and red fire, its cities reduced to rubble and its people dying by the millions. The sight of such destruction filled every human in the fleet with rage. They had come expecting to fight, but seeing the systematic genocide taking place below made this personal. These were not warriors fighting warriors. This was slaughter of innocents by creatures that seemed to enjoy causing suffering. Admiral Rodriguez opened a channel to his entire fleet, his voice carrying across space to every ship under his command. All ships, this is the Admiral. I want a message sent to every corner of this galaxy today. When someone calls Earth for help, we answer. When genocidal bugs threaten innocent lives, we exterminate them. All vessels, weapons, free. Let's show these monsters what happens when they mess with our neighbors. The first exchange of fire lasted exactly 43 seconds, but those seconds changed everything. Human weapons, designed by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing, tore through the Vorthak bioships like they were made of paper. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to incredible speeds, punching through organic armor that had shrugged off every weapon in the Cathani arsenal. Energy weapons cut through living tissue with surgical precision, targeting the nerve centers that controlled each bioship's functions. When the smoke cleared, 12 Vorthak vessels had been completely destroyed, their remains spreading through space like clouds of organic debris. The remaining human ships hadn't even lost their protective shields. It had been less a battle than an execution, and the Vorthak were learning for the first time in their species' history what it felt like to be prey. On the surface of Valoria Prime, High Admiral Zexathari stared at his tactical displays in complete shock. The unknown vessels that had arrived to help them were doing something impossible. They were not just fighting the Vorthak Collective, they were winning. More than that, they were making it look easy. "Sir?" his communications officer said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. They're asking for permission to, and I quote, clean house." The phrase made no sense in Cathani language, but somehow, Zexathari understood its meaning perfectly. These newcomers weren't asking for permission to retreat or negotiate. They were asking for permission to destroy every Vorthak ship in the system. The very idea seemed impossible, but the evidence was right there on his screens. Captain Dan Foster of the UES Retribution was having the time of his life. His ship danced between the massive bioconstructs like a small fighter, its weapon systems picking apart the living vessels with contemptuous ease. "This is actually easier than the Martian rebellion," he told his crew over the ship's communication system. At least the colonists knew how to shoot back effectively. The Vorthak were experiencing something completely outside their evolutionary programming. For millions of years they had been the ultimate predators, consuming entire civilizations, and growing stronger with each victory. They had never encountered a species that didn't flee when faced with their adaptive biotechnology. They had certainly never faced anyone who seemed to be enjoying the fight. These human vessels moved with impossible precision, their crews working, together with the kind of coordination that only came from years of training and combat experience. When a Vorthak bioship tried to adapt to human weapons, the humans simply switched to different weapons. When the creatures tried to swarm a single vessel, the other ships provided covering fire with devastating effectiveness. More disturbing still was the complete lack of fear these beings showed. The Vorthak had terrorized the galaxy for decades, because every species they encountered eventually broke under the pressure of facing seemingly infinite numbers of adaptive enemies. But these humans seemed to view the overwhelming odds as just another day at the office. Captain Lisa Murphy's ship, the Determination, had accounted for 6 kills in the first hour of fighting. Her crew worked with the calm efficiency of exterminators dealing with a particularly large infestation. "Tactical, I need a firing solution on that Queen-class bioship," she called out, pointing to one of the larger enemy vessels trying to flee toward the outer system. "Solution locked, Captain," came the immediate response from her weapons officer. "Fire." The Determination's main guns spoke with authority, sending a stream of accelerated metal into the bioship's command center. The creature died instantly, its massive form going limp as its nervous system was severed. Around it, smaller bioships began to flee in panic, their coordination broken by the loss of their controlling intelligence. By the end of the second hour, the Vorthak Collective's unstoppable swarm had been reduced to less than 100 vessels, all desperately trying to escape the system. But the humans had no intention of letting them go. These creatures had committed genocide, and Earth's warriors were not in the mood to show mercy to genocidal monsters. The retreat became a rout, and the rout became a slaughter. Human ships pursued the fleeing biovessels with relentless efficiency, hunting them down one by one as they tried to reach the hyperspace jump points at the system's edge. Captain Susan Wells of the UES Vengeance alone destroyed 8 fleeing ships, her crew whooping with joy as each enemy vessel exploded under their guns. The few Cathani defense forces still alive on the planet watched in amazement as debris from Vorthak ships began raining down like metallic snow. For the first time in 3 cycles, the orbital bombardment had completely stopped. The enemy that had seemed utterly invincible just hours ago was being systematically hunted to extinction by beings they had never seen before. By the end of the first day of fighting, the Vorthak Collective's mighty swarm had been reduced to fewer than 50 ships. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were now running like frightened animals, desperately trying to escape a system that had become their graveyard. But the humans were not finished with them yet. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the tactical display as the remaining Vorthak bioships attempted to reach the jump points that would allow them to flee into hyperspace. His face was set in hard lines, showing no mercy for creatures that had shown none to their victims. These monsters had come to commit genocide, and he intended to make sure they never got the chance to threaten anyone else. Captain Susan Wells called in from her destroyer, the UES Vengeance, her voice crackling over the communication system. "Admiral, the bug ships are trying to jump to hyperspace. Should we let them go?" There was hope in her voice that the answer would be no. Like every other human in the fleet, she had seen the devastation below and wanted justice for the innocents who had died. Rodriguez's response was broadcast on open channels, ensuring that every surviving Vorthak would hear his words and understand their meaning. Negative, Captain. We didn't come all this way to let genocidal monsters escape so they can terrorize other worlds. Hunt them down. Every single one of them dies today. What followed was less a battle than an execution. The human vessels spread out across the system, like a net, systematically tracking down each fleeing bioship and destroying it with clinical precision. These ships had been designed by a species that understood war in ways the galaxy had never imagined. Every weapon, every system, every tactical doctrine had been tested in the fires of countless conflicts on humanity's harsh homeworld. Captain Lisa Murphy's ship, the Determination, cornered a group of 5 bioships near the 4th planet's asteroid belt. The creatures tried to hide among the floating rocks using their organic sensors to mask their presence, but human technology had been designed to find enemies who didn't want to be found. Within minutes, Murphy's crew had located all 5 ships and begun the methodical process of destroying them. Target the neural clusters first, Murphy instructed her weapons officer. I want them to die quickly. Despite her anger at what these creatures had done, she was still human enough to prefer clean kills to unnecessary suffering. The Determination's guns spoke 5 times, and 5 bioships died in flashes of light and expanding clouds of organic matter. Captain Dan Foster was pursuing the largest remaining group of Vorthak ships near the system's outer edge. His crew had taken to calling the hunt pest control, treating the deadly bioships like insects to be exterminated rather than feared enemies. The casual attitude would have seemed insane to any other species in the galaxy, but for humans who had grown up on a world where everything was trying to kill them, this was just another day at work. Tactical. I count 12 bugs trying to form up for a coordinated jump, Foster reported to his weapons officer. Let's break up their formation before they can escape. The UES Retribution moved with deadly grace, its guns targeting the bioships, propulsion organs to prevent them from reaching escape velocity. One by one, the fleeing creatures were crippled and then destroyed. Foster's crew worked with the efficiency of a pit crew, loading and firing their weapons in perfect rhythm. Within 20 minutes, all 12 bioships were nothing but floating debris. Their dreams of escape ended by human determination and superior firepower. On the planet's surface, the Cathani survivors were witnessing something that would be talked about in their legends for generations to come. The rain of debris from destroyed Vorthak ships had turned the sky into a light show of falling metal and organic matter. For the first time in 3 cycles, children could play outside without fear of death from above. High Admiral Zexathari stood in his damaged command center, watching the tactical display with amazement that bordered on disbelief. The unknown vessels that had answered their distress call were not just defeating the collective, they were playing with them. Every move the Vorthak made was anticipated and countered with devastating effectiveness. Sir, his communications officer said, his voice filled with wonder. The orbital bombardment has completely stopped. The enemy appears to be in full retreat, but the rescue fleet is pursuing them. He paused, checking his readings again. Sir, I don't think they're going to let any of them escape. The final act of the battle took place near the system's primary hyperspace jump point, where the largest remaining Vorthak bioship was making a desperate attempt to flee. This was a queen vessel, the size of a small moon, and carrying the genetic material needed to rebuild the entire swarm. If it escaped, the collective could recover from this defeat and return to threaten other worlds. Admiral Rodriguez personally led the attack on the queen ship, bringing the full firepower of the UES Liberty to bear on the massive creature. The sect bioship tried to defend itself, launching clouds of smaller organisms that served as both weapons and shields. But human point defense systems designed to stop incoming missiles and projectiles made short work of the organic defenders. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks coordinated the Liberty's defensive fire, her voice calm and professional as she directed the destruction of hundreds of small bioforms. Point defense grid is handling the small fry, Admiral. Main guns have a clear shot at the target's central nervous system. Fire, Rodriguez commanded, and the Liberty's heaviest weapons discharged. In perfect synchronization, the massive Queen ship convulsed as the shots penetrated its bioarmor and severed the nerve clusters that controlled its vital functions. For a moment it hung in space like a dying whale, then slowly began to break apart as its organic systems shut down one by one. The death of the Queen vessel marked the end of the Vorthak Collective as a threat to galactic civilization. Across the system, the last few surviving bioships simply stopped functioning as the Queen's death severed their connection to the swarm intelligence. They drifted in space like empty shells, their threat ended forever. Captain Ben Parker of the UES Retribution watched the final enemy ship go dark and opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. All ships, this is Parker. Sensors show 0 active Vorthak vessels remaining in system. Mission accomplished. There was satisfaction in his voice. The contentment of a job well done and innocent lives saved. The human fleet had accomplished in less than 2 days what the entire Galactic Council had declared impossible. They had faced the most feared enemy in known space and destroyed it completely, suffering no casualties and minimal damage to their own vessels. More importantly, they had saved an entire species from extinction and sent a message to the galaxy that humanity would not stand by, while innocents were slaughtered. With the last Vorthak vessel reduced to floating debris, the human fleet began the careful work of securing the Cathani system. Medical ships moved toward the damaged planet while destroyers swept the outer regions for any remaining threats. The systematic approach showed a level of organization that impressed the surviving Cathani observers, who had expected their rescuers to simply leave after the battle was won. Captain Lisa Murphy found herself chosen to make first contact with the alien survivors. Admiral Rodriguez had selected her because of her diplomatic experience and calm manner under pressure. The responsibility both excited and terrified her, knowing that humanity's first official meeting with another intelligent species would set the tone for everything that followed. The meeting was arranged to take place in the ruins of the Cathani capital city. Human shuttles landed in the rubble-strewn plaza that had once been the center of their government, carrying Murphy and a small team of diplomats and scientists. The sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. A once beautiful city reduced to broken stone and twisted metal, with survivors emerging from underground shelters like ghosts from a nightmare. High Admiral Zexathari waited to greet them, supported by his surviving staff officers. The Cathani leader was tall and thin, with forearms and skin that seemed to change color with his emotions. Right now, that skin showed patterns of gratitude mixed with curiosity as he studied the beings who had saved his people. When Captain Murphy removed her helmet and revealed her human features, every Cathani in the area fell silent. They had expected their rescuers to be machines, or perhaps energy beings from a higher dimension. Instead, they found themselves looking at a relatively small, apparently fragile creature that looked remarkably similar to themselves, despite obvious differences in anatomy. "You're organic," Zexathari said in halting standard, his translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in Cathani thought. "Not machines, not energy beings. You're biological entities like us." His forearms gestured in what Murphy recognized as a sign of amazement. Murphy smiled, understanding the alien's confusion and choosing her words carefully. "That's correct, Admiral. We're human beings from a planet called Earth. When we heard your distress call, we couldn't ignore people in need." She paused, studying the destroyed city around them. "We're sorry we didn't arrive sooner." Zexathari's skin patterns shifted to show confusion mixed with disbelief. But the Vorthak Collective was the most dangerous enemy our galaxy has ever known. Their biotechnology adapts to any weapon, learns from every defeat, grows stronger with each victory. How did you destroy them so completely and so quickly? Murphy's expression grew more serious as she considered how to explain humanity's nature to someone who had never encountered anything like them. "Admiral, I think you made one fundamental error in your analysis. The Vorthak weren't the most dangerous thing in this galaxy." She gestured toward the human ships hanging in orbit above them like sleeping giants. "We are." Over the following days, as human medical teams worked alongside Cathani survivors and engineering crews, began repairing critical infrastructure, The true scope of humanity's nature began to become clear. The revelations started small, with casual observations that gradually built into a picture that challenged everything the Cathani thought they knew about life in the universe. Dr. Sarah Johnson, the fleet's chief medical officer, was treating wounded Cathani when she made an observation that startled everyone present. "Your gravity here is really light," she mentioned to her Cathani counterpart. "It's only about 1/3 what we're used to back home. My people are going to feel like we can jump over buildings while we're here." The Cathani medical staff exchanged glances of confusion. Valoria Prime's gravity was considered standard throughout the galaxy, with most civilized worlds maintaining similar conditions. The idea that someone could consider it light suggested that these humans came from a world with crushing gravitational forces that would kill most known species. Chief Engineer Mike Williams made another disturbing observation while helping to repair the planet's power grid. "Your atmosphere is really clean," he told the Cathani technicians working with him. "Back on Earth, we have to deal with much higher oxygen levels and all sorts of corrosive elements in the air. This is almost like breathing in a medical facility." Again, the aliens found this information troubling. Valoria Prime's atmosphere was considered harsh by galactic standards, with oxygen levels that required protective equipment for many species. The humans were treating it like a vacation resort compared to their home environment. The most shocking revelation came when Lieutenant Jake Harrison volunteered to serve as humanity's informal cultural ambassador. A group of Cathani scientists had asked him about Earth's classification in the galactic databases, and his answer left them speechless. "Oh, you mean the Deathworld thing," Harrison said casually, seeming unaware of the impact his words were having. "Yeah. Earth is classified as a Class 2 Deathworld. Most of the galaxy considers it impossible that complex life could evolve there at all." He paused, grinning at the expressions of horror on the alien faces around him. "Turns out evolution is one hell of a teacher." Chief Science Officer Nal Teth stared at the data streaming from Earth's probe transmissions, his multiple eyes unable to process what he was seeing. The planet these humans called home was a nightmare of crushing gravity, corrosive atmosphere, deadly radiation, and weather patterns that could level mountains. The very idea that intelligent life had not only survived, but thrived in such conditions, seemed to violate every law of biology he understood. "You evolved there," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "How is that even possible? Your world has gravity 3 times galactic standard. Your atmosphere would dissolve most known materials. The radiation levels alone should have sterilized the entire planet." Harrison shrugged, his casual attitude making the revelation even more disturbing to the assembled scientists. "Like I said, evolution is a great teacher. When your entire planet is trying to kill you every single day, you either get really good at fighting back or you go extinct." His grin widened. "Obviously, we chose option 1. The implications of this revelation spread through the surviving Cathani population like wildfire. These humans had not just defeated the Vorthak Collective, they had done it while operating in environmental conditions they considered relaxing compared to their home planet. They were literally the product of a world so hostile that it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that viewed impossible odds as just another day at work. Dr. Johnson provided the final piece of the puzzle when she was asked about human medical capabilities. "We're pretty adaptable," she explained to a group of fascinated Cathani physicians. "We can function in environments that would kill most species, survive injuries that should be fatal, and keep fighting long after other creatures would have given up." She gestured to a human technician who was working without protective equipment in conditions that required environmental suits for the Cathani. "It's just how we're built." The picture that emerged was both inspiring and terrifying. Humanity had evolved on a world so dangerous that it had created beings capable of surviving almost anything the universe could throw at them. They possessed technology designed by minds that understood conflict on levels the peaceful galactic civilization had never imagined. Most importantly, they had developed a culture that viewed protecting the innocent as more important than personal safety. As the days passed and more human ships arrived carrying supplies and aid workers, The Cathani began to understand that they had been rescued by something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans were not conquerors or destroyers, despite their fearsome capabilities. They were protectors, forged in the fires of the most hostile world in known space, who had chosen to use their strength to defend those who could not defend themselves. News of humanity's intervention in the Cathani crisis spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire carried on solar winds. The primitive Deathworlders, who had been dismissed as an impossible anomaly, had just accomplished what the entire combined might of galactic civilization had declared impossible. They had faced the Vorthak Collective and won, suffering no casualties while completely destroying an enemy that had terrorized known space for decades. Captain Dan Foster was enjoying a rare moment of relaxation in the officers' lounge aboard the UES Retribution when the first reports began arriving. Lieutenant Amy Collins approached his table with a data pad and an expression of barely contained amusement. "Captain, you're going to want to see this. The Galactic Council has sent an official delegation. Apparently, they're very interested in opening diplomatic relations with Earth." Foster nearly choked on his coffee, his laughter echoing through the lounge. "Let me guess, suddenly they want to be our best friends." He shook his head in amazement. Funny how quickly attitudes can change when someone proves they're not as helpless as you thought. The diplomatic delegation arrived within a week of the battle's end, traveling in ships that represented the finest technology the galactic community could produce. Leading them was Council Speaker Mordeth of the Xylanthi Confederation, a spider-like being whose species had dominated galactic politics for over 2 centuries. His usual arrogant demeanor had been replaced by nervous respect as he prepared to meet with the humans who had shattered every assumption about Deathworld species. The formal meeting took place aboard the UES Liberty, with Admiral Rodriguez representing humanity and the alien delegation arranged in a semicircle before him. The contrast was striking. The human admiral sat calmly in a simple chair while the assembled aliens, representing dozens of species, fidgeted nervously in their environmental suits and protective equipment. Speaker Mordeth began the proceedings with what was clearly a carefully prepared speech. "Admiral Rodriguez, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I wish to extend our most sincere gratitude for your intervention in the Cathani crisis." His mechanical translator rendered his clicking speech into perfect standard, though it couldn't hide the undertone of fear in his voice. "We had underestimated the capabilities of your species." Admiral Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his calm demeanor somehow more intimidating than any aggressive posture could have been. "Speaker Mordeth, with all due respect, your council specifically designated our region of space as off-limits to civilized species. You classified us as primitive Deathworlders who couldn't possibly have achieved meaningful technological advancement." The silence that followed was uncomfortable for everyone except the humans present. Captain Murphy stood near the viewing port, watching the alien delegates with the same detached interest a scientist might show when studying interesting specimens. Captain Foster had taken a position near the door, his casual stance somehow managing to block the only exit from the room. Finally, Mordeth's aide, a crystalline being called Silvera, found the courage to speak. "Admiral, the Council would like to formally invite humanity to join the galactic community as a full member species. Your unique perspective would be invaluable to our collective security efforts." The phrase "unique perspective" came out sounding like an apology. Captain Susan Wells, who had been listening from her position near the tactical display, couldn't suppress a smile. "Unique perspective? Is that what we're calling it now?" Her voice carried just enough edge to make several of the alien delegates step backward. Admiral Rodriguez stood slowly, his movement causing every alien in the room to tense with barely controlled fear. Despite being smaller than most of the delegates, his presence somehow filled the entire space. "Here's the thing, Speaker. You had 300 years to help the Cathani, 3 centuries to develop a response to the Vorthak threat. Instead, you let innocent people face extinction alone, because you were too frightened to fight." He walked to the viewing port, gesturing toward the recovering planet below where human and Cathani crews worked side by side to repair the damage. "We got the job done in 3 days. 3 days to accomplish what your entire galactic civilization couldn't manage in 3 centuries. His voice carried no boasting, just simple statement of fact that made it even more devastating. Rodriguez turned back to face the delegation, and every alien in the room took an involuntary step backward. So here's how this is going to work. We'll consider joining your council, but Earth doesn't take orders from anyone. We'll help defend innocent people throughout the galaxy, but we do it our way, with our methods, according to our principles. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. And if we ever again discover innocent people dying while the council debates and deliberates and forms committees to study the problem, we'll handle the situation ourselves, with or without your permission or approval. Speaker Mordith's mandibles clicked nervously, a sound his species made when facing extreme stress. And if the council refuses to accept these terms, the question came out as barely more than a whisper. Admiral Rodriguez smiled, and every alien delegate suddenly understood why the Vorthak had fled in terror. Then you get to explain to the next species facing extinction why you turned down the only people in this galaxy who are actually willing to fight for them. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Usually, species seeking council membership spent decades proving their worthiness and accepting whatever terms were offered. Humanity dictated its own conditions and made it clear that the galaxy needed them more than they needed the galaxy. 3 months later, the Terran Federation was formally inducted into the Galactic Council in a ceremony held on Earth. The symbolism was deliberate. If the galaxy wanted humanity's protection, they would have to come to the Deathworld and acknowledge it as an equal partner in galactic civilization. The ceremony took place in the rebuilt United Nations building in New York City, with representatives from over 200 alien species, gathered in the same chamber where humanity had once debated its own survival. Now those same humans stood as the acknowledged protectors of galactic peace, their very presence a guarantee that predatory species would face consequences for their actions. High Admiral Zexithari, now serving as the Kethani ambassador to Earth, stood beside Captain Lisa Murphy during the formal proceedings. The sight of his world's recovery had been remarkable. Human aid and technology had helped rebuild what the Vorthak had destroyed in a fraction of the time it would have taken using galactic standard methods. You know, Zexithari said quietly, as the human flag was raised alongside the banners of hundreds of other worlds. When we first sent out that distress call, we were hoping for a miracle. His skin pattern showed deep gratitude mixed with continuing amazement. Murphy watched the ceremony with satisfaction, knowing that humanity had found its place in the greater universe, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Admiral, you got something better than a miracle. You got humans who heard someone calling for help. She turned to face her alien friend, her eyes reflecting the same determination that had driven her species across the stars. And we always answer the call. The ceremony concluded with Admiral Rodriguez addressing the assembled delegates from the podium, where human leaders had once struggled with their own planet's problems. Today marks the beginning of a new era for galactic civilization, an era where predators and genocidal monsters will find themselves facing not just their intended victims, but the combined might of species who refuse to stand by and watch innocents suffer. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the sea of alien faces, each one representing a world that now looked to humanity for protection. The age of civilization cowering in fear while monsters roam free is over. The Deathworlders are here. We're part of your community now, and we're not going anywhere. In the years that followed, the mere mention of human ships responding to a crisis became enough to make even the most aggressive species reconsider their actions. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about judging others based on appearances and assumptions. Sometimes the most dangerous predator in the universe was the species that showed up to fight other predators. Humanity had found its destiny among the stars, not as the conquerors many had feared, but as the protectors everyone needed. They were the answer to prayers sent by the desperate, the guardians who arrived when hope seemed lost, the Deathworlders who had chosen to use their terrible strength in service of those who could not defend themselves. The galaxy was safer because of them, and everyone knew it.